The ground shook as another explosion tore through the ruins of New Dakota. Sergeant Jake Murphy pressed himself against a broken concrete wall, his rifle ready. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The battle had been going on for 3 days straight, and his unit was nowhere to be found. Jake wiped sweat and dirt from his face. His comm unit crackled with static, but no clear voices came through. The HFY had hit them hard this time. Their bug-like ships had come down from the sky like angry wasps, dropping soldiers that looked like giant mantises with energy weapons. The human colony didn't stand a chance. He moved carefully through the wreckage of what used to be a shopping center. Broken glass crunched under his boots. Empty stores stared at him with dark windows. A child's toy lay abandoned in the rubble, covered in ash. Jake tried not to think about what happened to the families who lived here. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. Water was running low, too. Jake needed to find supplies if he wanted to survive long enough to reach the evacuation point. Command said all troops should fall back to Sector 7, but that was 50 miles away through enemy territory. As he searched through a destroyed medical clinic, Jake heard a sound. It was low and painful, like someone trying not to cry out. He froze, listening. The sound came again from behind a pile of rubble near what used to be the back wall. Jake raised his rifle and moved closer. "Hello?" he called softly. "Anyone there?" The sound stopped. Jake waited, then heard it again. Someone was definitely hurt and trying to stay quiet. He climbed over the broken concrete and metal beams following the noise. What he found made him stop cold. A huge alien warrior lay trapped under a fallen beam. The creature was easily 7 feet tall, with dark green scales and a reptilian face. Yellow eyes looked up at Jake with pain and something that might have been surprise. This wasn't one of the bug-like HFY enemies. This was a Kethmoran, one of humanity's allies in the war. Jake had seen Kethmoran warriors before, but only from a distance. They were proud fighters who kept to themselves. Most humans found them scary-looking with their sharp teeth and clawed hands. But this one looked nothing like the fierce warriors Jake had heard about. This one looked like he was dying. The alien's armor was cracked and burned. Green blood seeped from several wounds. His breathing was shallow and quick. One of his arms was clearly broken, bent at an impossible angle. The metal beam across his chest was too heavy for him to lift alone. Jake lowered his rifle. The alien watched him carefully, probably wondering if the human would help or just walk away. In the Kethmoran culture, Jake knew, being left to die after a battle was considered normal. Warriors who couldn't fight anymore were supposed to die with honor. But Jake wasn't Kethmoran. He was human, and humans didn't leave people to die if they could help it. "Easy there, big guy," Jake said, setting his rifle aside. "I'm going to help you." The alien's eyes widened. He tried to speak, but only a grinding sound came out. His translator device was smashed, hanging in pieces from his armor. Jake examined the beam. It was part of a support column from the building's structure. Heavy, but not impossible to move if he used leverage. He looked around and found a long piece of metal pipe in the rubble. "This might hurt," Jake warned, though he knew the alien couldn't understand him. He wedged the pipe under the beam and pushed down with all his strength. The beam shifted slightly. The alien warrior tried to help, pushing with his good arm, but he was too weak. Jake repositioned the pipe and tried again. This time the beam moved enough for the alien to pull himself free. The Kethmoran warrior collapsed as soon as he was clear of the beam. His breathing was getting worse. Jake could see that some of his wounds were very serious. The alien needed medical help soon, or he would die right here in the rubble. Jake made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He couldn't carry someone this big very far, but he remembered seeing an old emergency shelter sign a few blocks away. Those underground bunkers were built to survive bombing raids. If he could get the alien there, they might both have a chance to survive. "Come on," Jake said, pulling the warrior's good arm over his shoulders. "We're getting out of here." The alien was incredibly heavy, but he tried to help by using his legs. Together, they stumbled through the ruins. Every few steps, Jake had to stop and let the alien rest. Blood left a trail behind them in the dust. The shelter entrance was hidden under debris, but Jake found the heavy metal door. It took both of them to pull it open. Stairs led down into darkness. Jake's flashlight showed a small room with basic supplies: water, medical kits, and emergency food. Jake helped the alien down the stairs and closed the door behind them. They were safe for now, But the Keth-Moran warrior was getting worse. His skin was turning a pale green color and his breathing was very shallow. "Stay with me," Jake said, opening a medical kit. He had basic training in field medicine, but he'd never worked on an alien before. Still, some things were the same for all living creatures. "Stop the bleeding, treat for shock, keep the patient breathing." The alien's yellow eyes followed Jake as he worked. There was something in that gaze, confusion, maybe even gratitude. This warrior had probably never been helped by someone from another species before. Jake cleaned the worst wounds and wrapped them with bandages. The alien's blood was thicker than human blood and a different color, but it clotted the same way. That was good. He gave the warrior water from his canteen, which the alien drank eagerly. As night fell outside, Jake sat against the wall of the shelter. The alien warrior lay nearby, his breathing more steady now but still weak. They were both alone, both cut off from their units, both just trying to survive another day. Jake looked at his unexpected companion and wondered what he had gotten himself into. In the morning, he would try to figure out how to communicate with this alien. For tonight, he would just make sure they both lived to see another sunrise. Outside, the sounds of war continued. But in the small underground shelter, two warriors from different worlds rested together, bound by nothing more than one human's decision to help someone in need. Jake woke up to the sound of movement. He grabbed his rifle and looked around the small shelter. The alien warrior was trying to sit up, his yellow eyes alert but still showing pain. 3 days had passed since Jake found him in the ruins, and the Keth-Moran was slowly getting stronger. "Easy," Jake said, holding up his hand in what he hoped was a universal sign for stop. The alien warrior looked at him for a moment, then slowly lay back down. His wounds were healing faster than Jake expected. Maybe Keth-Morans were tougher than humans. Jake had learned a few things about his companion over the past few days. The alien's name sounded like Veltar when he said it. He was some kind of important warrior, based on the fancy armor he wore, and he was completely confused by Jake's decision to help him. Communication was getting easier. Jake's damaged comm unit still had a basic translation program that worked sometimes. When it didn't work, they used hand signals and drawings in the dirt floor. Veltar was smart and picked up meanings quickly. On the first day, Veltar had tried to leave the shelter. He was clearly in pain, but seemed to think he should go somewhere to die alone. Jake had to physically stop him, which led to the alien staring at him like he was crazy. In Veltar's culture, apparently, wounded warriors were supposed to find a quiet place to die with honor. Having someone take care of you was shameful, but Jake didn't care about alien honor codes. He cared about keeping people alive. Why? Veltar had managed to ask through the translator on the second day. It was one of the first clear words that came through. Jake had pointed to himself, then to Veltar, then made a gesture that meant same. He wasn't sure if the alien understood, but Veltar had stopped trying to leave after that. Now, on the fourth morning, their supplies were running low. Jake had been rationing the emergency food and water, but there wasn't much left. They would need to move soon or risk starving to death in their safe hiding place. Jake checked his comm unit again. Still no signal from his unit or command. The HFY were probably jamming all frequencies in this area. For all he knew, the human forces had written off this entire sector as lost. Veltar watched Jake work with the comm unit. The alien said something in his own language, then tapped the broken translator on his armor. He pointed outside and made a gesture that Jake had learned meant danger. "Yeah, I know it's dangerous out there," Jake said. "But we can't stay here forever." Veltar seemed to understand Jake's tone, if not his words. The alien warrior struggled to sit up again, and this time Jake helped him. Veltar's armor was dark green with silver markings that Jake guessed showed rank or unit. The armor was damaged but still impressive looking. Jake pulled out his map and spread it on the floor. He pointed to their current location, then to the evacuation point 50 miles away. Veltar studied the map carefully, then shook his head. He pointed to a different area and made slashing motions with his clawed hand. "HFY?" Jake asked. Veltar nodded and made more slashing motions. "Lots of HFY." He pointed to several areas on the map, showing Jake that the bug-like aliens had spread out across most of the territory between here and the evacuation point. This was bad news. Jake had hoped they could travel at night and avoid enemy patrols. But if Veltar was right, the HFY had taken control of most of the region. Veltar pointed to himself, then to a different area on the map. His people, Jake realized. The Kethmoran forces were somewhere to the east. But that was almost as far as the human evacuation point, and in the opposite direction. So we're both stuck, Jake said. The alien warrior studied Jake for a long moment. Then he did something Jake didn't expect. Veltar reached into a pouch on his armor and pulled out a small device. It looked like a metallic flower with crystalline petals. When Veltar touched it, the device began to glow softly and make musical sounds. Jake listened in amazement. The sounds weren't random. They formed patterns like a song. Veltar was singing or maybe reciting poetry. His deep voice made the words sound both fierce and beautiful. When the song ended, Veltar looked at Jake and tried to explain through gestures. He pointed to the device, then to himself, then made a motion like writing or recording. Jake began to understand. This was how Veltar's people remembered things. They sang about battles and warriors and important events. Veltar held up the device again and sang a shorter song. This time when he finished, he pointed to Jake. "You're singing about me?" Jake asked, surprised. Veltar nodded and tried to speak through the damaged translator. Some words came through clearly. Save, honor, human, remember. Jake felt embarrassed. He hadn't done anything special. He just helped someone who was hurt. Any decent person would have done the same thing. But apparently in Veltar's culture this was worth making a song about. "I'm nobody special," Jake said. "Just a Marine doing his job." Even with the language barrier, Veltar seemed to understand that Jake didn't think his actions were important. The alien warrior looked confused by this attitude. He tried to explain something, pointing to himself and making gestures about fighting and dying and honor. Jake got the basic idea. In Kethmoran society, warriors were supposed to be completely self-reliant. Helping a defeated enemy was unthinkable. Helping an ally who couldn't fight anymore was also wrong, because it prevented them from dying with honor. But Jake came from a different world with different rules. On Earth, Marines had a saying, "No one left behind." It didn't matter if you were human or alien, friend or stranger. If someone needed help and you could give it, you did. As the day went on, Jake and Veltar continued working on communication. The alien was fascinated by human concepts like teamwork and mutual support. Jake was equally interested in Kethmoran ideas about individual honor and warrior codes. They were very different, these two soldiers from different worlds, but they were both professionals who understood war and duty and the weight of protecting others. That gave them common ground to build on. By evening, they had made a decision. They would travel together toward the human evacuation point. Veltar was strong enough to walk now, and Jake knew he would need the alien warrior's help to get through enemy territory. It was a strange partnership, a human marine and a Kethmoran war singer, thrown together by chance and held together by necessity. Neither of them knew it yet, but their alliance would change both their people's understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. As they prepared to leave the shelter the next morning, Jake looked at his unlikely companion and hoped they would both survive what was coming. The journey ahead would test everything they thought they knew about honor, duty, and what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. They had been walking for 2 days when the HFY patrol found them. Jake and Veltar were moving through the ruins of an old industrial zone, trying to stay hidden among the broken machines and collapsed buildings. Veltar was doing much better now, though he still moved slowly because of his healing wounds. The alien warrior had proven to be a good traveling companion, able to spot dangers that Jake missed and knowing things about HFY tactics that helped them avoid enemy positions. The communication between them was getting better too. Jake's damaged translator worked about half the time now, and they had developed their own system of hand signals and gestures. Veltar was even learning a few English words, though his accent made them sound strange and growling. "Stop," Veltar whispered, holding up a clawed hand. His yellow eyes were focused on something ahead. "Smell it, bug people." Jake crouched down and sniffed the air. He couldn't smell anything unusual, but he had learned to trust Veltar's sharper senses. The alien warrior's nose could detect things that human technology missed. They moved carefully toward a low wall and peered over it. In the distance, Jake could see movement among the wreckage of what used to be a factory. 5 HFY soldiers were searching through the area, their insect-like forms moving in the jerky, precise way that always made Jake's skin crawl. The HFY looked like giant praying mantises, with green and brown shells and multiple arms that could hold different weapons. Their heads moved constantly, scanning for threats with large compound eyes. Jake had fought them before and knew they were fast, smart, and very dangerous. "We go around," Jake whispered, pointing to a route that would take them away from the patrol. But Veltar was studying the aliens more carefully. He pointed to something Jake hadn't noticed, a small device one of the HFY was carrying. The alien warrior tried to explain through gestures and broken English words. Communication, device, call, more bug people. Jake looked again and realized what Veltar meant. The HFY patrol had found something and was reporting it back to their commanders. If they were calling for reinforcements, this whole area would soon be crawling with enemy soldiers. "We need to stop them," Jake said. Veltar looked at him like he was crazy. 5 HFY against 1 wounded alien and 1 human was not good odds. In Veltar's culture, attacking when you were outnumbered like this would be considered suicide, not bravery. But Jake was already thinking tactically. The HFY were spread out, focused on their search. They weren't expecting trouble from behind. If Jake and Veltar hit them fast and hard, they might be able to take out the patrol before it could call for help. "Trust me," Jake said, checking his rifle. He had enough ammunition for a short fight, but they would have to make every shot count. Veltar stared at Jake for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. The alien warrior pulled out his own weapon, a long blade that glowed with energy along its edge. Kethmaran warriors preferred close combat to shooting from a distance. Jake pointed to 2 HFY on the left side of the group, then to himself. He pointed to the 3 on the right, then to Veltar. The alien warrior understood the plan and moved into position. They attacked together. Jake's first shots took down the HFY with the communication device before it could send a message. The other alien spun around, looking for the source of the gunfire. That gave Veltar the opening he needed. The alien warrior moved faster than Jake expected, covering ground in long leaps that brought him close to the enemy. His energy blade cut through HFY armor like paper. The insect-like aliens tried to fight back, but Veltar was already among them, his weapon spinning in deadly arcs. Jake kept firing, taking careful shots at any HFY that tried to flank Veltar or escape to call for help. The battle was over in less than a minute, leaving 5 dead enemies scattered among the industrial wreckage. Veltar stood over the bodies, his blade still glowing. Green HFY blood dripped from his armor. He looked at Jake with something that might have been respect. "Good plan," the alien warrior said in careful English. But their victory celebration was cut short when Veltar found what the HFY patrol had been investigating. Hidden under some debris was a human communication device, still working and broadcasting on emergency frequencies. Jake grabbed the device and listened to the message that was repeating over and over. It was from Captain Lisa Rodriguez at a place called Haven's Rest, and what she was saying made Jake's blood run cold. Haven's Rest was a refugee camp about 20 miles from their current position. 3,000 civilian colonists were sheltering there, protected by only a small garrison of human soldiers. And according to the message, HFY forces were gathering for a massive attack on the camp. The message was 3 hours old. By now, the attack might have already started. Jake looked at the dead HFY patrol and realized what they had been doing. They were advanced scouts reporting on human positions and defenses. The communication device they had been carrying wasn't for calling reinforcements. It was for coordinating the assault on Haven's Rest. "We have to warn them," Jake said. Veltar looked at the map Jake spread out on the ground. Haven's Rest was marked clearly, along with the best routes to reach it. But those routes went straight through territory that was now controlled by HFY forces preparing for their attack. "Many bug people between here and Human Place," Veltar said. "Very dangerous." Jake knew the alien warrior was right. Getting to Haven's Rest would mean traveling through enemy lines, probably fighting their way through multiple patrols, and doing it all while racing against time. The smart thing to do would be to continue toward the evacuation point and let someone else deal with the refugee camp. But Jake thought about the 3,000 civilians at Haven's Rest. Families with children, elderly colonists, wounded soldiers who couldn't fight anymore. They were counting on Captain Rodriguez and her small garrison to protect them, and they had no idea that a massive HFY force was coming. "I have to try," Jake said. "Those people need help." Veltar studied Jake's face for a long moment. The alien warrior was clearly struggling with something. In his culture, taking unnecessary risks for strangers was not considered honorable. A warrior's duty was to his own people, not to random civilians from another species. But Jake had already shown Veltar that human ideas about duty were different. Humans helped people because they needed help, not because of complicated honor codes or tribal loyalty. Finally, Veltar nodded. "We go together," he said. "Human way. Maybe not so crazy." They gathered their gear and set off toward Haven's Rest, moving as fast as Veltar's healing wounds would allow. The journey would take them through the heart of enemy territory, but they had advantages now. Jake's tactical thinking and Veltar's knowledge of HFY behavior made them a formidable team. As they traveled, they talked about their families and the reasons they fought. Jake told Veltar about his younger sister Amy, who worked as a teacher on Earth and wrote him letters about her students. Veltar spoke of his mate and their young hatchlings on Kethmora Prime, and how his songs would tell them about their father's battles. The alien warrior also shared something that surprised Jake. Veltar felt shame about being left for dead by his own forces. In Kethmoran culture, this meant he had failed somehow as a warrior. The only way to restore his honor was to die in battle defending something important. "Maybe saving those people at Haven's Rest will give you that chance," Jake said. Veltar looked thoughtful. "Or maybe," he said slowly, "honor is not about dying. Maybe honor is about choosing to help, even when it is hard." It was a strange conversation between two warriors from different worlds, but it helped them understand each other better. By the time they could see the smoke rising from Haven's Rest in the distance, they were no longer just temporary allies. They had become something stronger. They had become friends. The smoke rising from Haven's Rest told Jake and Veltar everything they needed to know. They were too late to prevent the attack, but maybe not too late to help. They crouched on a hill overlooking the refugee camp, watching the battle unfold below. Haven's Rest had been built in a natural valley, with prefabricated buildings arranged in neat rows. Now many of those buildings were on fire or destroyed. Human defenders were fighting desperately from whatever cover they could find, but they were badly outnumbered. Jake counted at least 50 HFY soldiers attacking the camp, with more arriving every few minutes. The insect-like aliens moved in coordinated groups, using their superior numbers to overwhelm the human defenses. Captain Rodriguez and her garrison were fighting bravely, but Jake could see they wouldn't last much longer. "Too many bug people," Veltar observed. "Human soldiers fight well, but he didn't need to finish." They both knew how this would end. The HFY would eventually break through the defensive lines, and then the civilian sheltering in the camp would be slaughtered. 3,000 innocent people would die because there weren't enough soldiers to protect them. Jake studied the enemy positions through his rifle scope. The HFY had set up a command post on the opposite side of the valley, where their leaders were coordinating the attack. He could see several of the aliens wearing different colored armor, probably officers or specialists. An idea began forming in Jake's mind. It was crazy and dangerous, but it might be their only chance to help. "What if we hit their command post?" Jake asked. "Create enough confusion to disrupt their attack?" Veltar looked at him like he had suggested jumping off a cliff. 2 warriors against many? Is suicide mission? Maybe, Jake admitted. But if we can knock out their leadership and communications, Captain Rodriguez might be able to launch a counterattack. Save some of those civilians. The alien warrior was quiet for a long time, watching the battle below. Jake could almost see him thinking, weighing Kethmoran concepts of honor against this new human idea of tactical flexibility. "In my culture," Veltar said slowly, "warriors die in open combat, face enemy with blade in hand. This plan is sneaking, hiding like coward." Jake nodded. He understood the alien's dilemma. Everything Veltar had been taught about being a warrior went against the kind of mission Jake was proposing. Kethmoran soldiers believed in direct confrontation, honorable duels, dying gloriously in battle. But Jake had a different perspective on warfare. "Where I come from," Jake said, "we have a saying, win ugly. It means victory is more important than looking good while you fight. If sneaking around and hitting them from behind saves those people down there, then that's what we do." Veltar considered this. "Human way is different. You bend rules, think outside warrior codes." "Yeah, we do," Jake said. "We fight dirty when we have to. We use every advantage we can find. Because in the end, the only thing that matters is protecting people who can't protect themselves." The alien warrior looked down at the refugee camp. where human civilians were huddled in whatever shelter they could find, children crying, families holding each other, wounded people being carried to safety. It was the kind of scene that would haunt anyone with compassion regardless of their species. These humans, Veltar said, not soldiers, not warriors. Why do you risk life for them? Jake thought about how to explain it. In human society, protecting civilians wasn't just a military duty. It was a moral obligation. Soldiers existed to defend people who couldn't defend themselves. That was the whole point of having an army. Because they're innocent, Jake said finally. They didn't choose this war. They're just trying to survive. If we don't help them, who will? Veltar was beginning to understand something profound about human nature. These people weren't his tribe or his species, yet Jake was willing to risk everything to save them. This was completely alien to Kethmoran thinking, where loyalty was strictly limited to your own clan and honor group. This is human honor? Veltar asked. Helping strangers? I guess so, Jake said. We don't always get it right, but we try to help when we can. The alien warrior made a decision that would change his entire worldview. Then we try human way, he said. Attack command post, create confusion. Maybe save innocent people. They spent the next hour planning their assault. The HFY command post was heavily defended, but it was also focused on the battle in the valley. Jake and Veltar would approach from behind, using the rocky terrain for cover. Their goal wasn't to win a prolonged fight. It was to cause as much damage as possible and get out before reinforcements arrived. Jake had grenades and explosive charges in his gear. Veltar knew which HFY equipment was most important to their communications and coordination. Together they developed a plan that played to both their strengths. As the sun began to set, they moved into position. The command post was a cluster of temporary structures and communication arrays, guarded by about a dozen HFY soldiers. Jake could see several of the alien commanders inside a large tent, studying holographic displays that showed the battle in real time. Remember, Jake whispered, we hit fast and hard, then get out. No heroic stands. Veltar nodded, though Jake could tell the alien warrior was still uncomfortable with the whole concept of a surprise attack. In Kethmoran culture, you announced yourself to your enemies and gave them a chance to prepare for honorable combat. But this wasn't about honor. This was about saving lives. They struck just as the HFY commanders were planning their final assault on the refugee camp. Jake's explosives took out the communication arrays in a series of brilliant flashes. Veltar's energy blade cut through surprised guards before they could raise an alarm. The command post erupted in chaos. HFY soldiers ran in all directions, trying to figure out what was happening. Officers screamed orders that no one could hear over the explosions and alarms. Jake and Veltar fought their way through the confusion, destroying equipment and eliminating key personnel. They weren't trying to kill every enemy soldier. They were targeting the aliens who coordinated the attack on Haven's Rest. The plan worked better than Jake had dared hope. Without clear orders from their commanders, the HFY forces attacking the refugee camp began to lose coordination. Some units continued their assault, but others pulled back or stopped advancing altogether. Captain Rodriguez noticed the change immediately. Her voice crackled over the radio frequencies, rallying her defenders for a counterattack. Human soldiers who had been fighting a desperate holding action suddenly found themselves pushing back against confused and disorganized enemies. But Jake and Veltar's success came at a price. As they fought their way out of the command post, Jake was hit by HFY plasma fire. The energy blast burned through his armor and into his chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Veltar could have escaped alone. The alien warrior was faster and less injured than Jake, but instead he turned back and lifted the wounded human onto his shoulders. Leave me, Jake gasped, blood running from his mouth. Get out of here. No, Veltar said firmly, carrying Jake away from the burning command post. Human way is no one left behind. Now is Kethmoran way too. As they escaped into the rocky hills, Jake could hear the sounds of battle changing in the valley below. Captain Rodriguez's counterattack was working. The HFY were retreating, their coordinated assault broken by the loss of their command structure. 3,000 civilians would live to see another day, because two warriors from different worlds had chosen to work together. But Jake was dying, and both he and Veltar knew it. In the growing darkness, Veltar found a sheltered cave where they could rest. Jake's breathing was becoming shallow and labored. The plasma burn had done too much damage for field medicine to repair. Did we win? Jake asked weakly. Veltar looked back toward Haven's Rest, where the fires were beginning to die down and the sound of gunfire was fading. Yes, he said, we won. The innocent people are safe, Jake smiled despite his pain. Good, he said. That's what matters. As Jake's strength faded, Veltar began to understand the true meaning of human honor. It wasn't about following ancient codes or dying gloriously in single combat. It was about making the hard choices that saved lives, even when those lives belonged to strangers from another world. Jake Murphy died as the first light of dawn touched the hills above Haven's Rest. Veltar held the human marine in his arms as life slowly left his body, listening to Jake's final words about his sister Amy and how proud he was that they had saved the civilians below. When Jake's breathing stopped, Veltar sat in silence for a long time. He had never watched someone from another species die before, and he was surprised by how much it affected him. In Kethmoran culture, death in battle was supposed to be celebrated, not mourned, but this felt different somehow. Veltar pulled out his song device and began to compose verses about Jake Murphy, the human marine who had saved an alien warrior and then died protecting strangers from another world. But the traditional Kethmoran words didn't seem right for this story. How could he describe someone who fought without regard for personal honor, who bent rules to save lives, who showed compassion to enemies? As he worked on the song, Veltar heard voices in the distance. Human soldiers were searching the hills, probably looking for survivors from the command post attack. Veltar could have hidden until they passed, but instead he stood up and called out to them. Captain Lisa Rodriguez arrived with a small patrol an hour later. She was a tough-looking woman with tired eyes and burn marks on her armor from the night's battle. When she saw Jake's body, her expression grew sad but not surprised. She had lost too many good soldiers in this war. Sergeant Murphy? She asked, reading Jake's name tag. Yes, Veltar said, his translation device working well enough for basic communication. He saved my life. Then we saved your people. Captain Rodriguez looked at the alien warrior with new interest. You're the ones who hit the HFY command post? That's what turned the battle around. Veltar nodded. Jake's plan. Human way of fighting. Very effective. Over the next few hours, as human soldiers secured the area and tended to their wounded, Veltar told Captain Rodriguez the whole story. How Jake had found him dying in the ruins, how they had traveled together through enemy territory, how they had decided to risk everything to warn Haven's Rest about the coming attack. Captain Rodriguez listened carefully, asking questions about Jake's actions and the tactical decisions that had led to their success. She was impressed by the partnership between human and alien, but not entirely surprised. She had worked with Kethmoran units before and knew they were honorable warriors. What will you do now? She asked Veltar. The alien warrior looked down at Jake's body, then back toward the refugee camp where civilians were beginning to emerge from their shelters. I return to my people, he said. Tell them about human way of fighting, about Jake Murphy and what he taught me. Captain Rodriguez arranged for a military transport to take Veltar back to the nearest Kethmoran outpost. Before he left, the alien warrior performed a ceremony that few humans had ever witnessed. He sang the honor-binding ritual, formally adopting Jake Murphy into his clan and declaring him to be a Kethmoran warrior despite his human birth. Now his name will be remembered in our songs, Veltar explained to the watching soldiers. His actions will be taught to young warriors. He will live forever in Kethmoran memory. The journey back to Kethmoran space took 3 days. Veltar spent the time working on his song about Jake Murphy and thinking about everything he had learned. The human approach to warfare was so different from traditional Kethmoran tactics. Humans were willing to sacrifice personal glory for practical results. They helped people because it was right, not because it brought honor to their families. When Veltar finally reached the Kethmoran forward base on Rigel Prime, he requested an immediate audience with the War Council. This was unusual. Individual warriors were expected to report to their unit commanders first, not demand meetings with the highest military authority. But Veltar had something important to say, and he knew it couldn't wait. The War Council met in a great hall carved from black stone, with banners displaying the battle honors of different Kethmoran clans. 5 elderly warriors sat in judgment, their scales marked with the ritual scars that showed their rank and experience. They listened in silence as Veltar told his story. When he finished, the war council was quiet for a long time. Finally, the eldest warrior spoke. "You ask us to change traditions that have served our people for thousands of years," he said, "to abandon the honor codes that make us who we are." "No," Veltar replied. "I ask you to expand our understanding of honor, to learn from allies who fight differently than we do." He activated his song device and played the verses he had composed about Jake Murphy. The music filled the hall, telling the story of two warriors from different worlds who had found common ground in their desire to protect innocent life. "This human taught me that honor is not just about following rules," Veltar said when the song ended. "Sometimes honor means breaking rules to do what is right. Sometimes it means helping people who cannot help themselves, even if they are strangers." The War Council debated for hours. Some members argued that Kethmoran traditions should not be changed based on the actions of one human soldier. Others pointed out that their alliance with humanity was not working as well as it could, partly because the two species had such different approaches to warfare. In the end, they reached a compromise. Veltar would be allowed to establish a new training program for young Kethmoran warriors, teaching them about human tactical flexibility alongside traditional combat skills. It was an experiment, but one that might help both species fight more effectively together. Over the following months, Veltar's program grew and evolved. He taught Kethmoran soldiers about concepts like acceptable, losses, and mission flexibility. He showed them how humans made quick tactical decisions based on changing circumstances rather than following rigid battle plans. More importantly, he taught them about the human concept of protecting civilians and non-combatants. This was revolutionary thinking for a species that had always focused purely on warrior honor and clan loyalty. The results were impressive. Kethmoran units that had been trained in human-style tactics began working much more effectively with their human allies. Joint operations that had previously failed due to cultural misunderstandings started succeeding. A year after Jake Murphy's death, the war against the HFY Empire reached a turning point. Human flexibility combined with Kethmoran strength proved to be an unbeatable combination. The insect-like aliens, who had been winning through superior numbers and coordination, found themselves facing an alliance that could adapt faster than they could respond. Veltar was promoted to War Singer Prime, one of the highest ranks in Kethmoran society. He used his position to continue advocating for closer cooperation with humanity. His songs about Jake Murphy became required learning for all Kethmoran military academies. But perhaps the most important change was in how the Kethmoran people viewed honor itself. Veltar's teachings had introduced the idea that true honor came not from following ancient traditions, but from making moral choices in difficult situations. Young Kethmoran warriors began to see protecting civilians as a mark of strength rather than weakness. They learned to value practical results over glorious defeats. Most importantly, they began to understand that helping others, even strangers from different species, was not shameful, but honorable. 5 years after the battle at Haven's Rest, a memorial was built on the site where Jake Murphy died. It was a joint project between human and Kethmoran engineers, a tall spire of metal and crystal that could be seen from space. The inscription was written in both languages. Here stood two warriors who chose compassion over protocol and changed the galaxy. Jake Murphy, human marine, and Veltar, Kethmoran warsinger. They proved that true honor transcends species, tradition, and the boundaries between worlds. Veltar attended the dedication ceremony, along with Captain Rodriguez and dozens of other human and Kethmoran officers. As he stood before the memorial, he thought about the young Marine who had saved his life and taught him a new way to think about honor and duty. Jake Murphy had never expected to change the course of an interstellar war. He had simply done what he thought was right, helping someone in need, protecting innocent people, fighting for something bigger than himself. But sometimes the smallest acts of compassion have the largest consequences. In the end, Jake's greatest victory wasn't the successful defense of Haven's Rest or the destruction of the HFY command post. It was showing an alien warrior that true honor comes from choosing to help others, regardless of the cost to yourself. That lesson lived on in Veltar's songs, in the young warriors he trained, and in the stronger alliance between humans and Kethmorans that eventually won the war. Jake Murphy's name became legendary among both species, not as a great general or famous hero, but as someone who proved that kindness and courage could overcome any barrier. It was, Feltar often thought, the most human thing of all